Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Rank, and I'm the Director of Certification Services here at Park. I'm filling in for Margaret, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but she wanted me to say hello to everyone. We have a few exciting things, and then I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll hand it over to our fabulous speaker, Shelley Trent, today. So first, CDCS is coming up. If you haven't taken it, it's a wonderful program that can show you the back end of LinkedIn and how features work from the front end to the back end. Robin's amazing. If you want to sign up for that, I believe it starts October 4th, next Wednesday at 11:30 Eastern. And we have a special discount for viewers today. It is Robin 10 for a 10% discount. Mark, do you mind putting the link and the code in the Q&A since chat
Sure.
isn't working? Um, we also have some fabulous events coming up. First, we have Rising Professionals next Thursday. If you're thinking about building a business, you're in the middle of it, you have a side hustle, you want to transition from corporate to your own business, it's a great place to be. We have lots of fun talking about all sorts of topics about business, and we really learn a lot from each other. I've been facilitating that for a couple of years now, and I really feel like that group has been huge in making my business successful. Plus taking Angie Callen's PBA. So build your business, boost your business. Sorry, I'm really bad at this today. Build your business. It's a great program if you're thinking anything about building or starting or refreshing what you're doing. Um, then we have Coaching Insights with Diane on October 18th. So check that out if you'd like to learn and ask questions about your coaching skills. She's an amazing person and can really help you out with that. And also don't forget that our yes, there's a question. Does the code only apply to the live version of the training? It's for the live and the self-paced. You can use it for both. Thrive's coming up April 28th through the 30th. We are very excited. Angie, Mark, and myself are planning that conference. We have some help from some other folks in the industry, or I'm sorry, in the association. The super early bird promo is coming to an end on Saturday. You can save $300 off the original price. So definitely check out thrive.show and put in the promo super 150 to save a little bit extra money on your fee. Okay, so I would love to introduce Shelley Trent. She was so amazing. She reached out to me to talk about several things for writers, and I absolutely was excited to ask her to speak about ATS. We have a full house today, so I'm very, very excited about that. We do have one little technical thing going on. For whatever reason, chat is not working today. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. If you want to chat, go ahead and use the Q&A. We'll just use it normally. And then Mark and myself will make sure Shelley sees those questions and then, clear out what we can. So Shelley Trent has been an HR and career development professional for all of her life. She's worked for SHRM for over 16 years, and she has background in association management, human resources, college career services, corporate employee career development, and business and industry training. She has so many amazing certifications. I can't list them off, but all of them off, but she's a senior professional in HR. She has a PhD from University of Louisville.
Not quite.
She's, oh,
ABD.
not quite. You're
Yeah.
working
ABD.
on it.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're getting there, so close. Continue your education and several career certifications from Career Development. What is that? National Career Development Association and some other partner associations. So we're really excited to have you here, Shelley. So Mark and myself will go off screen, but go ahead and share your slides, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, I'm so excited to be with you, everybody. And I'm going to talk today about how to beat the bots. I do this program for people all over the place. This is the most common program I do. I did it this week for my alma mater, a college, and it's just something that I work with a lot of my clients about. People might have a wonderful resume, it looks beautiful, but is it going to beat the ATS? And that's the key. So I'm going to talk today about quite a few different things, and I'm going to probably talk a little bit fast to make sure that we cover everything in the time we have together. But here's a few things we're going to talk about, just some general resume advice and tips. These are probably going to be things that you've already heard before, but in case anything is new to you, I hope you have a few nuggets you can take back with you. And I'm going to do the training as if it's talking to your clients instead of to you. So it's maybe going to help you think of things from their perspective. Specific rules about applying for a job through an applicant tracking system, the importance of your accomplishment statements in an ATS application. We know they're important, but they're even more important when you're doing an online application. The significance of having a fully completed LinkedIn profile. And I won't be covering a lot of things on that. That's a whole other program, but just some tidbits there. And what you must maintain if you're going to do online applications. So when I'm working with clients and I'm teaching students or whoever, I'm doing a program for the public, one of the things that makes me feel a little sad, and I would guess that you probably feel this way too, is that people just slap together a resume to apply for a job. And they're like, if I get it, no big deal. But to me, a resume is the most important document of your life. It's going to be what helps you make an income, take care of your family, have a home, have a car, pay your bills. And a lot of people just treat it like it's no big deal. So I want people to really pay attention that, this is the most important document of your life. And so I try to instill that in clients and students and things and people I teach. It's really an advertisement to sell your services for pay. And it has to be succinctly targeted to a specific employer and that job description. And it's really important when you get to the ATS that that's the case. And you need a different resume for every job application, as I'm sure you know. But again, what I see a lot of times, and I've been a recruiter myself, and in one of the last contract jobs I had where I was doing some recruiting, I noticed so many people have gone to using this on LinkedIn and on Indeed, quick apply or easy apply. And it really is frustrating for the recruiter because they don't even read the job posting. So I had put out things like you had to have these 4 skills or you had to have a cover letter and you had to do, X, Y, and Z. And they didn't even read it. They just put their resume in my application, and I had to go through hundreds of applications because we didn't have an ATS. This is a very small nonprofit. And it was just really frustrating from my point of view. So if you're working with clients who are using that quick apply or easy apply, depending on which program they're using, tell them to carefully read the posting, because I just weeded those out. Our CEO said if they don't write a cover letter, even if they're the best client the best applicant out, if they don't follow the instructions, they're not going to be a good employee. So share that information with your clients. One-page resumes, of course, are preferred for an entry-level job or somebody with fewer than 10 years of experience. And 2 pages can be for more. I will tell you, as an HR professional, one of my friends sent me his resume to look at when he was looking for a job, and it was 16 pages. Granted, he'd had a whole career in HR, but nobody wants to read all of that. So I had to say, yeah, you have all these great skills, but you need to get it down to 2 pages, because other than 2 pages, it looks like you're bragging. And, it's never a good look for anyone. You want to highlight the job skills that you've had that relate to what the employer is asking for and exclude irrelevant information and experiences. Just for an example of that, one of my first job out of college was to be a probation and parole officer. And I always just say HR is just a different type of law enforcement. That's my little joke. But when I decided to make the change from basically criminal justice into human resources, the parts of my job that I did that I liked the best or career coaching with them. Sometimes the judge would sentence them to get a job or go to school, get a GED. And so that was the part of my job I liked the best. And so I looked at a lot of job postings in HR and said, which one of these or which sets of these skills have I used in this work? And I left off totally my law enforcement duties. There's no, if the next person doesn't care about those duties or responsibilities, then there's no reason to even list them. So you want to keep it short and sweet. You want to keep it relevant to what the employer is looking for, leave out anything unnecessary. Excuse me, folks, my allergies are terrible, and it just happened to pick this time to act up. And the ATS is also able to find misspelled words, grammatical errors, and it's going to kick them out. It also will kick out resumes that have time gaps or job gaps. So we'll talk about that more in a second. And basically, the ATS is looking for someone who meets all of the qualifications, or at least usually 85%. So,
Shelly, we have a question back on that slide. So you mentioned 2 pages. No one wants to read more than that, but we have a question about what about 3 pages for executives and they have over 20 years of experience?
Well, what I suggest is 2 pages, and then you have a full LinkedIn profile. Everything you've ever done is on LinkedIn, because basically that's a free resume online. You pick out the things that are most important to the employer and you leave the rest out, like I said, and that can be on LinkedIn. I still say 2, 3, maybe. Just in my experience with my other HR friends, 2 is more than enough. If there's a whole bunch of things you want to list, like your professional associations, excuse me, or boards that you're on, things like that, maybe 3. I hope that helps. Okay, so as you all have heard before and have probably told your clients, the resume needs to look like a funnel so that the most important information is at the top. The reason this is important with an ATS is that some ATSs are only going to look at the first page, which goes back to why maybe getting a 2 page is more important if you have an ATS. Now, with an executive position, they might be giving their resume personally to someone who they know or not applying online. So that might not matter. But if you are applying online, sometimes the ATS, depending on the version that they have, only looks at the first page, which is so important to have it on the top. Let me give you another example of when I have found that this was a problem. I was working with a gentleman who had an HR career. He had a master's degree in HR, but he hadn't had any interviews or callbacks in a year. And so he sent me his resume and said, what am I doing wrong? What is wrong with my resume? Well, he didn't have anything at the top like HR professional, any kind of headline statement. And he just started off with experience, and his current job was soccer coach. And I said, well, there you go. If anybody sees this resume in a pile for an HR job, they're going to set it aside and say, what's this doing in here? This is a sports coach. So if you looked at the bottom of his resume, he had his HR degree, he had a master's degree, he had like 10 or 12 years of HR experience, but he had it like midway down the page. And so, we had to rearrange and make it a functional resume instead of chronological. But again, that's why it's so important to have everything important on the first page at the top. So you probably know that 90% of recruiters use LinkedIn to find candidates. And yeah, they probably do post jobs, but I will tell you that a lot of jobs are never posted, as you are aware, I'm sure. My husband used to be a technical recruiter, and he never posted any jobs. He would use the recruiting software on the back end of LinkedIn, and he would put in his search terms, location, whatever the certification was supposed to be that they had, their degree, whatever it was that he was looking for, and he would call people directly. And that is more and more common. I used to do that. I think it's much better. I find who I want. I don't have to read 500 resumes of people who didn't read the application instructions. And I can talk to the people who already I know meet the criteria that I'm looking for. So this is very common. And if you are talking to your clients and they don't have a really great LinkedIn profile, have them completely fill it out. There's software now with AI, I'm sure you know, that they can put the text from their LinkedIn profile in. Résumé worded is one of them, but it will tell you, your profile is about 60%. So I was surprised. I did that just a few days ago just to double check to see where I was. And I feel like my LinkedIn profile is so complete. It has everything on there, but it still gave me a lower score than I expected and things I needed to do to improve. And so a lot of recruiters aren't even using job postings anymore. They're finding people through social media, especially LinkedIn.
Billy, here's a quick question that we can kind of come around to, because LinkedIn now has the option for like a career break. So you can show that on LinkedIn. But you mentioned before that some ATSs will kick people out for like gaps in the resume. So there's a question in the chat about how long of a time gap will result in your resume getting kicked out. For a client with a time gap due to childcare for a newborn, do you recommend they mention it on the resume? We can mention it on LinkedIn pretty easily now, but what do you say for the resume?
Yes. What the ATS is looking for is a gap where there's nothing. So if it shows that you've been unemployed for 9 months or something, it will know that. You want to put something on your resume that shows what that time gap was used for, family care, whatever it was. Some people during COVID, they lost their jobs and they decided, you know what, while I'm looking for a job, I'm going to get my MBA or whatever it might be. But you want to put that in your resume to address the time gap so that the ATS won't assume that you had no job at all or you weren't doing anything.
Perfect. And then what was that tool you used to evaluate your LinkedIn? What was it called?
Résumé worded.
Résumé worded. Perfect.
Yep.
And then what about things like, because we got some questions more about gaps. What about things like, cancer, illnesses that you might not want to disclose necessarily?
You can just say, sorry, I'm going to get a drink of water since my throat won't stop.
Yeah.
tickling. I'm so sorry, you guys. I sneezed a lot right before this call. So you don't have to say what you were off for, like from cancer, but you can just say something like, dealing with family matters or personal matters or something like that. Be general or generic. But you don't want to leave it just blank, that there's just this year or two gap where there's nothing. You want to address it somehow.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so why do recruiters use an ATS? Well, it's probably pretty obvious. They receive hundreds of resumes for every opening. They're looking for easy ways to weed people out. So, a typo, bad grammar, something like, of course, the gap, or things that aren't quite right on their resume. All of those things are going to be ways that they can just put those people aside and only focus on the ones who meet the requirements. And, some students would say, well, if I have one typo, they're not even going to talk to me. Like, well, they're not going to even look at your resume. You're not going to have the benefit of the doubt. It's just going to go into the black hole of the ATS. So the best way, I'm sure is getting your resume to someone through networking. So with my clients, I have, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I have a lot of connections in HR because of my background with SHRM, thousands of HR professionals. And if I have a connection at a certain company, if I'm working with a client, I have no issues connecting with that person or sending them something on LinkedIn saying, will you, please consider this person for this position, because I know them. And so at least it's going to be something where they've been alerted to someone's name and they can go pull the resume, or I can send it myself and kind of get around the ATS. But that's really the best way, is getting in front of the HR person or the recruiter without going through the ATS. So for your clients, they might think, oh, the competition is fierce because so many people are looking for a job in my field. Well, it's not the other applicants, it's the ATS. The ATS is so tricky and has been wired to be so smart that's really the competition. Top Resume. This is some data that I got off their website last night, so it is up to date. On average, a corporate job posting gets 250 applications. I know for a tiny nonprofit, I got over that for a part-time job, if you can believe that. Of those 250 applicants, 4 to 6 are contacted for an interview. Usually it's a phone or a Zoom interview. That's narrowed down to 3 or 2. 99% of the larger organizations have an ATS. Big companies get 50 to 75,000 resumes a week, and 75% of resumes will never be seen by human eyes. I kind of think it's more than that.
That is amazing. And quick question then, Shelley. Are there other places where you find resources like this to give us ATS data? Kathy wants to know, where are some other good sources of information like that?
Well, if you look at the bottom of my slides, a lot of times I will have a link to where I got the data.
That's great. And then tell me if I'm jumping ahead here, but Deborah asked about specific aspects of a resume going through ATS, specifically the contact information. Does that need to be on each page of the resume? Do ATSs read resumes per page? Do some of them scroll from front to back? How does that kind of thing work?
Well, some of them are made up to just look at the first page. Most of them will read the whole thing. I'm going to get to the contact information in just a few minutes, but I will just say at this point, do not use headers and footers. It can't see that. It's kind of like it's behind the wall. So you want that at the top of the page in the text, not behind, not in a header or a footer. You can put your contact information at the top, or at least your name for the second page, and maybe your name, your phone number, your email address across the top.
Great.
So just a few more factoids about an ATS. It's used to sort candidates who are a certain percent match. So if I'm the recruiter, I can put in that I want 85%, 90%, 95%. So I'm putting the text from the job posting in, and the resumes that come through, it's going to tell me who matches the best. So I might cut it off at 85 or 90. And if you don't match that high level, you're not even going to be seen. It's only going to tell me the people who match the best. 62% of companies say, yeah, we're probably missing some qualified candidates because of the ATS, but they don't mind because it saves them time. And some of them, if it's an older version, it still uses ocular character recognition, OCR. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically, if you've ever looked at online articles where you see it might have been an apostrophe and it looks like all these little symbols, that happens if it's reading the resume through an OCR, and they have percent signs, they have ampersands, they have any kind of symbol, it will make them look weird. So that's why it's important to use very simple formatting. And well, I'll go into more about the formatting in a minute. But again, ATS is set up to choose people or looking at the requirements of the job and not anything extra. So if you have clients who want to put everything they've ever done on their resume, every duty they've ever had, it just isn't necessary. It's taking up valuable space. And ATS doesn't care, and the employer doesn't care. I will just say the employers, from the HR perspective that I have 30 years in HR, they don't care about all the things you've ever done in your life. They want to know what you can do that matches what they want you to do. And that's all. So, have your clients bring their resume back down to reality, I guess I would say.
Lori, or Shelley, sorry, we have a question from Lori. You mentioned an 85 to 90% match on keywords and phrases, but can you talk a bit more about the matching?
I'm going to go into that a lot more. I will just say at this point, the keywords and phrases are in the posting. So, and there's software programs you can use, jobscan.co, Resume Worded. Again, you can put the text of your resume and the text of the posting, and it will tell you what percent match you are. If you don't have 85% or more, you need to keep working on your resume. The posting is what's in the system, and it's going to look for the words and phrases in the posting. But I'm going to go into more of that in just a moment. ATS reduces the number of applications that somebody has to read, which that's the main purpose of it. And again, I mentioned sometimes it's set up to just look at the first page, and the ATS does look for misspelled words, poor grammar, and it's just going to kick them out. And an OCR application can recognize characters with 98 to 99% accuracy on, for the most part. But if your 2-page resume has 800 words, you can expect that there might be up to 16 characters that it doesn't recognize, and it will come out as weird symbols on the page that they're looking at. An ATS creates a standardized resume document from all types of resume styles. Now, you might be working on beautiful resumes that are laid out so nice and they look so professional. The ATS can't even read that. It can read text. So this is a way, and if you've ever paid attention, if you're applying for a job, usually you upload your resume, the system moves the resume text over into boxes, and you have to make sure line by line that every single thing from your resume moved into the correct box. It looks right. It doesn't have weird symbols. It has bullet points like you wanted, because that is what the person pulls up. They don't pull up the beautiful resume in the ATS. They pull up the text that's in those boxes that you fill in. And people go, well, why do I have to redo my whole resume? Well, that's why, because it's the ATS. You can always know it's an ATS when you have to move the data over. And so about 50% of organizations use an ATS. That's the data. I think it's more than that, but you won't know if they do. So you have to assume they do. It's better to assume they do. Bullet points, for example, need to be round. They need to be the kind that comes with your bullet point thing in Word, not the check marks, not the stars, not the open boxes. It needs to be a plain round bullet. Simple is better. It allows the employer also to see where you saw the posting. Where are you applying from? So let's say you saw it on LinkedIn, it can tell where you're applying from. And that helps them know, well, 60% of the people applied from LinkedIn, 20 from Indeed, 20 from someplace else. It just helps them know that. The ATS also sends automatic rejection emails or letters. You might have applied for a job and you immediately, within 5 or 10 seconds, you get an email, no thanks. That is why, because the ATS already decided you don't have the match percent that they wanted. And so it just kicks you out and it gives you a no thanks. So they don't have to go back through every resume and send you an email, a rejection email, basically. And this is so important for you as writers. Don't put a list of keywords at the top. An ATS is set up smart enough to know, or it's not tricked by lists of keywords. It wants to see you use those keywords and phrases from the posting in the body of your resume, not in a list at the top. And if you use a list at the top and you don't use those same words throughout, it's going to know, oh, they just put a list of keywords here to fool me. Well, it's not going to fool the ATS. They're smarter than we think. They're bots. So again, most of the time, somebody's not even going to see your resume until it meets the criteria the ATS is knowledgeable about or has in its system. You want the resume to have the keywords and phrases from the posting, but again, throughout. If your resume doesn't have all of those words and phrases or most of them, you might not get a match or a resume review. And again, 85% or more is usually what they're looking for. So if you have clients who say, well, I'm just going to apply for everything I think I would like, well, that's a waste of their time, because they should be writing cover letters for every application, making a new resume for every application. And that takes a lot of time. I know when I was looking for a job, sometimes I would spend 3 hours applying for one job because I wanted to make the cover letter exactly to the posting. I wanted to make my resume exactly to the posting. I wanted to make sure everything was filled out online. I wanted to make sure that I had my references page, whatever. It takes a long time. So if you're not a match, don't waste the time, because in my perspective too, as an HR person, it's wasting my time. I felt like my time was wasted when all those people applied on LinkedIn using that easy apply and they weren't even qualified. They didn't even read the posting. You want to also, I mentioned already, resume worded is something I use. It's an AI program, and jobscan.co, not .com.co. This is where you can cut and paste your resume, cut and paste the job posting, and it will tell you a percent match. I think it has 5 free uses, and then you have to pay, but there are enough software or online programs out there, platforms, that you can find a way to do it.
And Shelley, quick question, because we do have several questions that pertain to this slide specifically.
Okay.
Do you want us to jump into a couple of those? Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So when online systems are scoring resumes, they take into account the number of times a keyword is in a posting compared to how many times it might be on the resume. So if the posting has a keyword repeated 5, 10, 15 times, it's not really feasible that you might get it on that resume that many times. So how can you get a score of 85% or higher with that in mind? The kind of follow-up to that question is that sometimes keywords use like tenses of a word or other forms of a similar word that aren't exactly, like what we might put on a resume, like management skills. You might not put that on, a resume. So how do you say things like management skills without being that generic?
Well, again, you want to look at the words. Oh, was somebody saying something?
Nope, all you.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard another voice. So from everything I've read, you can use those keywords 3 or so times. You don't want to use it way more times because, again, it might think you're trying to trick it. But 3 or so times would be about ideal because they'll see that and they want it in the body. You know how you have your bullet points? They want it in the body of in the bullet points so that it knows that you're saying you've used this skill, not just that you have this skill. So anybody, and I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail in a moment, but anybody can say excellent communication skills. Well, no. If you don't prove that you have them, the ATS says, so what? And I say, so what? So if you want to say that you have excellent communication skills, you want to say in the resume examples of when you've used excellent communication skills, like making presentations, giving public presentations, doing, teaching a class, whatever it is, writing manuals, whatever it is that you can show that you have those communication skills. That's what it's looking for. Did you say there was? Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of people asking about this idea of skills on a resume and a skills section or a core competencies section or something like that. So do you advise that we use them to showcase some skills, but also include that information down in the bullet points? Basically, the question is an areas of expertise or a list of skills going to negatively impact someone's ability to go through ATS? It
might, to be honest, it might. If you have the list of skills and those words aren't used in other places, it's going to just say you're just giving me a list to get around me. It's set up to think that way, or it's set up so that if you don't explain how you've used those skills, it thinks you're tricking it, basically. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how they're set up. I'm going to get to that more in a second if we can.
Perfect. Yeah, let's keep going.
If there's anything else, let me know. But you want to follow application instructions to the letter. And so what I find a lot of times, people will be applying for a job and they will leave some blanks like, well, I don't want to tell you the date of my college years. And honestly, I have to say, as an HR person, I wish they would outlaw having to put dates of graduation, high school, any of that in a resume, because it tells your age. It's a protected class. If you're over 40, that's against the law for them to ask. But sometimes they do anyway, and I hate that. But you have to follow the instructions to the letter. And if you leave anything out blank, it will kick you out. And if it says to attach something, or if it says to fill in this box, or if it says you have to put your start and ending salary and you don't, you're not going to be looked at. Unfortunately, you have to follow every instruction. Also important, as you're uploading, name your document with your name. It should be something like Shelley Trent Resume 2023.doc. The safest is .doc, not docx, even though that's the newest version of Word. Some ATSs aren't set up at the higher level yet, or at the newer versions. So the safest is .doc. It will tell you what you can upload. If it says PDF, docx, whatever, it will tell you what you can upload, and that's what it accepts. But it's always safe to have it in a doc. And the reason it's important to name it with your name is that if all of the resumes I receive are named resume, doc, then when I pull them into my own computer to pull them up and look at them, I have to open every one of them and rename it to the person's name before I can do anything with them. And it's very frustrating from the HR perspective if they're all named resume. So make sure you tell your clients to name it their name. So again, I talked about having a very simple format. The ATS can't read symbols, lines, logos, pictures, shadings, tables, columns, boxes, headers, and footers. Don't use templates. I know they're beautiful, and I love the look of resumes in a template, but if they're going to go through an ATS, it just can't read it. It can't read any columns on the side. It can basically just reads text only. So you also want to include just the normal sections like experience, education, skills, whatever it is that your headlines are or headings are. If you're using something like memberships, affiliations, publications, public speaking, it might not understand what that is. And so that's when you see that the resume text content has been moved into the boxes in the ATS, you'll see sometimes that stuff doesn't go in the right place because it doesn't know what to do with it. It's not familiar with the heading that is used. So make sure that you tell your clients that when they're uploading their resume and they look at what's uploaded, they have to carefully look at that because that's the part that's downloaded. The format of an upload, I mentioned, sometimes we want to do a PDF because we want it to stay in the format we put it in. We want it to stay pretty and not change the way it looks when somebody else pulls it up who might not have the same version of Word. But again, it will tell you what type you can upload. It will say PDF, doc, docx, whatever, and you can upload those file types. The safest, again, is .doc. You can see this beautiful resume over here. That's a bad example for an ATS. It won't know what to do with any of that. A good idea also, because some can't even read a PDF. So you want to probably send it in Word if it says .doc or docx. But keep in mind that it has to be simple formatting. The best thing to do is convert it to a text file and see what it looks like. That's the best because basically the ATS is reading that as a text file. There are some ATSs that can't convert PDF, HTML, Open Office, Apple Pages, and they just discard them. They're not even going to be spit out the other end, unfortunately. Fonts, that's also an important issue. A lot of people still are using things like Times New Roman because they think, well, that should get through the ATS because that's been around so long. Well, the ATS usually can't read a serif font very well because of the little curls and lines on the ends of the letters. Those are very hard to read, especially if it's an OCR. You want to use a sans serif. Calibri and Arial are the most common, probably the safest bet for sending a resume through an ATS. So some of this is a rehash here. I get ahead of myself sometimes. You want to have 85% or more of the requirements for the posting. Sometimes they even say 100%. I know that's crazy, but sometimes it is. You want to try to include every keyword and phrase from the posting. Again, you want to use your keywords in the body of your resume. You also want a headline summary, or I think it's better just to have a headline, not a summary statement. I can tell you from my experience and other HR professionals, when we see a paragraph at the top, it's a turnoff. We don't want to read a paragraph about you. We want to scan it. We want to look at it really quickly. We want to scan through using the bullet points. A headline is the best thing, and I'll talk more about headlines in a second. You also, in your experience section, want to focus on your promotions, results, contributions, not responsibilities or duties or tasks. And I'm going to talk more about in just a moment about the importance of accomplishment statements in an ATS. Here's some other tricky stuff. So if your client is using abbreviations, you want to make sure you spell it out and use the abbreviation. So let's just say the person is a CPA. Well, if the job posting asks for a CPA, but then it also has certified public accountant somewhere, you want to make sure you have both. Plus, you don't know if the HR person, you might be working with people who have, skilled nursing or healthcare or engineering or something like that. I know from my husband, he's been a technical recruiter and he's been in IT. And when I was helping him with his resume, I'm like, people don't even know what these things mean. The lay person who's going to read it and decide if you're qualified, if they don't know what those abbreviations are, they might not think you're qualified. You have to spell them out and give the abbreviation. And again, I mentioned don't just put a list of keywords. We'll talk more about that in a second. What you should do at the top as a headline should just be basically a job title of who you are. So for me, human resources professional and career coach would be mine. It could be something communications manager, financial analyst, accounting intern, whatever it is. It's basically the title of your book. Now, we go back to the person who was a soccer coach. If he would have just put human resources professional at the top, it would have helped people understand to go past the soccer coach. I mean, he should have rearranged it, but you want the headline to be, this is who I am. This is what you're going to read about below.
When we talk about header and headlines like that, Lori asked a couple minutes ago, we know that we're targeting the recruiter or the hiring manager when we say things like that at the top. And when it comes to ATS, for example, director of human resources versus human resources director, would those both be matches for the ATS?
I believe so, because you have all the words. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about different titles and how they might not match, but that one would match.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a really simple, dumbed down, I guess, example of how to make sure that things match while using accomplishment statements, because we said that the list of words at the top is not going to be enough for the ATS. So here's how we're going to show to get around that. So let's just say that the requirements in the ad, and here's one of my pet peeves. People say 2 years experience, but they need an apostrophe. If you say years of experience, you don't need an apostrophe. But so that's an example of something to watch for. 2 years experience in marketing, create mail promotions, develop brochures, research target audiences, analyze sales figures, create marketing plans, maintain database of customers, take calls from customers, and resolve issues. So that's what the posting says. So how are you going to show that you have these skills, but in a punchy way that's going to use some extra information to prove that you have the skills rather than just sort of listing them? So let's just say this person's resume says 2 years experience in retail and restaurants, typed letters to send to clients, helped with newsletters to mail to our customers, performed data entry to maintain client lists, created flyers about our products, attended and took minutes of sales meetings. So that kind of matches most of the words that were in that posting, but it should say you want to give the statements as accomplishment statements. So 2 years experience in the retail and restaurant industries resolving customer issues. Produced company newsletter on our products and services that was sent to 10,000 customers per quarter. Maintained client list of over 50,000 in database. Ensured contact information was consistently updated. Merged mailing lists into our database. Promoted company products through creation of 4 marketing pieces per month, attended sales and marketing staff meetings, and gained knowledge of analyzing sales figures. That's pretty much saying the same thing that was over here and the same thing in the posting, but it's giving more detail so the ATS knows you've used those skills. And the reader then, once it's comes out the other end, it's going to be much more professional because you've answered the questions I will show you in a moment. You want quantifiable detail. I'm sure you all know about bullet points and action verbs. I do want to say, though, as you're doing your bullets, and I mentioned it earlier, make sure they're just the bullets, just like you see here. They're simple bullets. They're not graphics like a check mark or a star. They're the simplest format you can. So I'm going to talk to you about a blogger, Liz Ryan. You probably are familiar with her. If not, she's a very well-known HR social media blogger and was a VP of HR for a Fortune 55 company. And she had information online about boilerplate phrases. And this is where those lists of keywords and phrases or the summary statement comes into play. You don't want things like results-oriented professional, cross-functional teams, progressively responsible experience, superior excellent communication skills, strong work ethic, exceeded expectations, proven track record of success, blah, blah, blah. And Brad Karsh, he's one of my favorites. He used to speak a lot when I worked for SHRM. He was one of our most popular speakers. He has a book called Confessions of a Recruiting Director. And he agrees, these statements are worthless to HR. If you can't prove that you have these skills, don't even put them on here. We want to see that you've used these skills. Just because you say you have great customer service skills, it's not necessarily true unless you give us some backup that proves that you have these skills. And so it's important to use accomplishment statements, as I mentioned, because the ATS is set up to search for these types of words that you might want to say, I have these skills, but they need to be in the body of the document and not a list of duties like this or skills. I'm sure you probably have been told this too, or you've heard this, or you use this tip for your own clients. You don't want to use the same verb twice to start a line. So when you're using the bullet or the action verbs, you don't want it to be handled, manage, manage. You want it to be all different words for each line. And you want it to be short sentences or phrases, no paragraphs, never use I, me, my, mine, responsibilities included, anything like that. It just needs to be quick for the HR person to scan. If you've had multiple jobs that have the same duties, responsibilities, you don't need to repeat those same lines over and over. I read resumes sometimes, and a person was an HR manager at 2 different companies, and it's the exact same exact same list. Well, punch it up a little bit. Give me some more information about what you did. And I'm sure you all have taught your clients about using the STAR interview method with situation, task, action, result. As they're going through their resume, every line, if they can think about how can I put this in an accomplishment statement that tells kind of the action, the task, action, result for every one of those lines, that's always very helpful to the reader. So here's a couple of things that are, what, say what? 50% are never read. You have fewer than 10 seconds. 6 seconds is probably more like it, as the HR person is going to just scan the resume once they get it in their hands. They're going to, in that scan, look for the job titles, the companies where you worked, the start and end dates, and your education. Those are the most important things to them. Some quotes from recruiters I thought you might find interesting. The resumes that caught my attention were the ones with specific measures of success, and it's a highly subjective process, so I advise people to be clear, concise, organized, and put the most important stuff at the top. So talking about
really fast.
Yeah.
I think this relates nicely to the previous slide. The question is about how you structure job title, dates, company location. I think that certainly a person reading it can adapt pretty quickly as long as it's consistent. But for an ATS, does it matter? And what if you have more than one job at a company? Do you list the company and then multiple jobs under it, or do you list the company with the job every time?
Yeah, I actually I think I have a slide on this coming up, but
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think from my perspective, I like to see the job title first and then the company, because what you did is what matters to me. Where you work is important too, but what you did is more important. So I would say the job title would go first. And being promoted, let's just say you work for ABC company. You can say, ABC company, if you want to do the company first, and then you can show your title. And in that list, your bulleted list below, you want to say, for the second job, promoted to above position for whatever reason. But you can list one company with all the jobs under it, but you want to be sure that you say you were promoted. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So a little bit more about accomplishment statements. So what I always tell people, I want to see you answer who, what, when, where, why, how many, how much. And if you can quantify or qualify anything that you're listing as your responsibilities or your bulleted list, it's best to do that. So instead of saying provided excellent customer service, here's a better example, or really, I'm just going to skip to the best. Recognized by supervisor for tactful dealings with difficult customers, received award for having highest customer satisfaction rating for the quarter. That's more of an accomplishment statement. People think, well, I didn't win any awards, and it doesn't have to be an accomplishment like an award. It can just be something that you did and you want to qualify or quantify it. So another one, trained employees. I see this one all the time. How about this? Developed customer service training program and presented it to 100 staff members over a 6-month period, resulting in a 110% increase in customer satisfaction levels. Another one, used accounting software. How about this? Taught self and others to use QuickBooks and set up computer-based bookkeeping system for a small business with over 300 accounts. Those are answering some of these. You don't have to answer every single one of them, but for the ones you can, the who, what, when, where, why, how many, how much, that's very helpful. So here's some other examples. I just pulled these off the internet last night. You can see where I got it below there. Some accomplishment statement examples. Processed cash, check, and credit transactions, maintaining 98% accuracy to minimize end-of-day balancing errors. I'm not going to read all of these, but you can see 300 plus customer complaints per week, more efficient call script that was well received and implemented by management, $10,000 in fundraising, exceeded monthly KPIs by 10%, wrote and directed a series of videos, 20,000 views, anything that you can do. And even if you don't have the numbers, if you can say how it was received, how it was used, maybe you came up with an easier way to do a task and everybody did it in the company and you were recognized by your boss for good work. Any of those are great for accomplishment statements. Now, going back to what I talked about with Liz Ryan and Brad Karsh earlier, if you have things like you're just going to have these general things at the top, leadership, communication, organization, whatever, you need proof of how you've used these skills. They want to see proof, and you can give that proof through an accomplishment statement. And it's okay also if you provide volunteer work. Maybe your jobs haven't given you some of these skills. Maybe your job, you work by yourself, and so there's not a lot of opportunity for teamwork, but you want to talk about teamwork skills that are in the posting, so you can use some teamwork information from volunteering that you've had if you want to have a volunteer section. Okay, more about accomplishments. So what special things did you do that impressed your boss? Why did you get a promotion? What did your boss say in your performance review? What I used to do was save all of my emails, any kind of comments I got that were positive from my clients or anything. I would save those all year long. And when it came time to do my performance review, I would tell my boss, here's all the comments I received. So you want to keep all that sort of thing. You want to keep your performance reviews, and you can use that information on your resume. What were the things that your boss complimented you on? You can also use them in your interview, because a lot of times they will ask you, what would your boss say about you? What would your coworkers say about you? That you have the answer. What did you do to overcome problems or challenges that you face? What were the results of your efforts? All of these things are tied back to the STAR interview method. You're answering those types of questions. So make or save money, save time, make work easier, solve a problem, be more competitive, build relationships, on and on. Accomplishments to leave off your resume. I had this discussion yesterday. High school awards, high school sports, anything like that. Once you've gone to college, all that high school stuff needs to come off. If you went to a college where you had, maybe it was a community college and all your credits were transferred into another degree, and you left the community college and you got a degree from another school, the community college general education stuff, that doesn't need to be on there. It's just wasting space. You've graduated now. If you have another degree, like maybe you earned an associate's degree and then you earned a bachelor's, absolutely you can put that on there. But I would not just put, a school or two schools where you earned some credits and it didn't result in a degree. So I would leave that off. Old work experience. Now, if you are over 40, this applies to you. It applies to me for sure. You don't need to put anything on there past 10 years back, 15 years back. Nobody's going to judge you that you don't have experience back to 1985 because that tells them your age. I actually was looking at a resume of one of my dear friends, and she had a very, very long resume. It was probably about 8 pages, and she went all the way back to her internships. I'm like, no, you don't need to do that, because it gives them the information of your age. Basically, you don't need to do that. Once you have professional experience, you don't need to list anything like your scholarships earned, your dean's list, your GPA. You've graduated, you have other experiences to focus on, and you don't want to put anything on there that's a personal accomplishment that relates to religion, politics, anything like that. Only professional accomplishments such as certifications. If the posting requires 10 years of experience in accounting, but your resume says 5 in bookkeeping and 5 in accounting, this was an answer to one of the questions that came up earlier, it's going to think you don't have 10 years of accounting experience. The titles will matter. So I have another slide a little bit later about this, but here's an example. If you need to tweak your titles to get around the ATS, it's okay to do so, because basically if you are a bookkeeper, you're kind of doing accounting functions. So you might just want to say, here's an example that, if the ATS says they want 12 years as a consultant, but your titles have been advisor, counselor, specialist, whatever, but part of your role is being a consultant, you can say advisor and consultant, specialist and consultant. Again, somebody asked about how many times should I use the keywords? 3 times or so. And this is from articles from the ATS. 3 times or so, that's enough. If it thinks you're trying to use it 10 or 12 times, it might kick you out because it thinks you're trying to trick it. You want to start with your most recent experience, if you're using chronological, obviously, but you would be surprised how many times I see resumes who start from their first job and move forward in time. You also want to have the title you held. I talked about this, organization name, the city and the state. And if it's not clear from the name of the organization what the job or what kind of company it is, it's okay to say that. So if you say Humana, nobody knows what that is. It's something that goes on where I live. It's a big company. You can say healthcare insurance or whatever. The ATS, as I mentioned earlier, they do know to look for gaps in employment. So you want to have something for every time slot. You want to say what dates your positions were held. And again, answering the question that came up earlier, if you've had several positions with one employer, you can list the employer once and show that you were promoted internally throughout that section. The responsibilities that you list should be in order of each item's relative value to the employer. So usually the order of items on the job posting is the order of importance. So again, that stuff goes to the top. And be sure that all of your information is true and not exaggerated, because a quick call to get a reference or, call the prior employer, that's easy to be verified. I will tell you, I do know some people who were not hired because they lied on their resume. So you have to watch that as well. So just a little bit more here. I know we're running out of time. So at the top, and I think you're probably aware of this, but we don't put addresses on resumes anymore. I still see a lot of resumes with that. Just the city, state, zip code, that's enough. Such as Chicago, Illinois area, that would be fine. The reason, with Google Maps, if I'm curious and nosy, I can put your address from your resume in on Google Maps, see where you live. Maybe you live in a part of town I don't like. Maybe you live in a mansion and I think I can't afford you. It's nobody's business where people live, especially if it's for a remote job. It's just better to leave it out. Telephone numbers where you can be reached from 8 to 5, but not your work number, not your email address or work email. I still see resumes where somebody has their company phone number and company email address at the top, and that's a big no-no. I also want to say that even though you might be working with clients more on their resume and not these other factors, I will say that from the HR perspective, make sure that there's a professional sounding voicemail, because if I'm going to call you, because it's happened to me, it's happened to my friends. If I call you and the voicemail is like, yo, you know what to do, not going to leave a message. And if your email address on your resume is not professional, like your name, for instance, mine is shellytrenatlive.com. If it's something weird or goofy, not going to get a call. We're just not going to do it. If your clients are not professional enough to use a professional sounding email address, they're not going to get past anything. So no dog lovers, no tattoos, no guitars, no, pardon my language, but I will tell you that one time I got one that the email address was ass kicker. That's chokes me up to even think about how bad that is. But another thing is, a lot of people have problems with inconsistent capitalization, things like bachelor's degree, finance course, things like that. Only the proper names should be capitalized. So if you have a Bachelor of Science degree in business, That's the name of your degree. But if I have a business degree, that is not. I took classes in accounting, business, and communications. Those are not the official name of the class. I work in HR and training. His title is Chief Financial Officer. So you want to be careful with those capitalized words, because I will tell you that I see so many resumes where people capitalize human resources everywhere in the resume, and it's not necessary. Pet peeve of mine, because I'm an English nerd. So just a couple more slides here. Things that they should not do. Don't use the word resume on top. It's obvious what it is by looking at it. No photos, pictures, logos, anything like that. No personal information. Anything about religion, church, politics, no. You don't want to list your reason for leaving on your resume. You don't want to put your salary history in your resume. You don't want to use a lot of different font faces and styles. And you don't want to list, again, churches, political affiliations. However, do keep a list of all. This is important. So if you're dozing off, this is important. One of the most important things I will say for the ATS. Do keep a list of all of your past employers, their mailing address, so the street address, your boss's name, your boss's phone number, your boss's email. If that person's no longer there, give the main number for the company and an email of the HR professional who can verify your employment. If any of those are left blank, out. Be prepared to list on the ATS application your salary, or it might be the starting and ending salary. If you leave it out, you're out. It's easy to verify. So if you think I'm going to tell them I made 80,000, but I only made 40, that's easily verified. And although I will say HR people are only supposed to ask certain questions, but we're all friends. Like I live in the Louisville, Kentucky area, and I'm really involved in the local SHRM chapter, and we all know each other. And, I could be having lunch with my friend and it just happens to slip out. Well, I'm interviewing somebody who used to work for you and la, la, la. Yeah, stuff like that might happen. You just have to be careful. You want to retain your exact dates of employment. And I already mentioned using your personal number and email address. Let me tell you just a quick little story. I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit over here, but I get so passionate about this topic. The reason it's so important to give your exact dates of employment, even the day, and if you need to, go back and check what dates those were. You can always call the HR department and they can look it up for you. A friend of mine from college, during college, he worked summers and seasonally for the Dollar General Corporation, and they had a big, like a warehouse type of place, and he worked there unloading trucks. He didn't work there consistently for the whole 4 years he was in school. It was like summers, and it might be, around Christmas time, or it might be, 4 or 5 different times a year. So when he went to apply for his first professional jobs, he put down kind of the starting date and the ending date of that big blob of time. Well, he was a finalist for a position, a really good job that he really wanted. And he got a call from the hiring manager, said, "I'm sorry, we didn't choose you. We went with the other candidate." But he knew he was the second choice. He said, "Do you mind if I ask you, why I didn't get the job? Is there something I can do better?" And the person said, "You lied on your application." And he said, "What?" And she said, "You used the wrong dates of employment." So that is how important it can be to have those exact dates. So if you're using, 2000 to 2012 or whatever, that's fine on the resume. But on the application, if it asks you for the month and the day and the year, you want to check that out. You want to provide references on request, but don't list them on your resume. And you always want to ask permission to use references. You want to provide your references with an updated resume and the job posting for everything you apply for, so they are ready to talk about you. I will give you one more quick example, and then I will stop. I had a student years ago who said, "Can I use you as a reference?" And when she was right in my class, I said, "Sure." And I figured she might use me just for the next couple of jobs. Well, like 10 years later, I get a call. She's used me as a reference. I'm like, I don't know what she's doing now. I have no idea. She hasn't kept up with me. So that was embarrassing for me as the person giving a review, for the employer asking me to give a review for somebody I didn't even see for 10 years, and for the person who provided a reference from somebody who didn't remember what was going on. So that, just, tell your clients that. Good luck getting your resume past the ATS. Here is my contact information if you have other questions that we might not get to, shellytron@live.com. and I'm going to stop sharing. And if you want to, Mark, ask me the questions that I might have missed. Whew, sorry.
Yeah, no, that was great. Oh my gosh, so much information. It was really interesting because we have different speakers that come to Writer for Writer, and the information varies, right? And so I found it really interesting from your perspective to see what exactly can get through ATS and what can't. So if we can rapid fire a few questions, I'll try to get through everybody's here on the Q&A. But please reach out to Shelley if you have any additional questions. Okay. So if something gets automated, the automated no thanks, could you maybe apply again through another email?
Yes, but you better redo your whole resume and make sure you
Right.
have a 90% match.
Make sure you match.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of competing information about using cover letters and what do they really matter? What are your thoughts on that?
I do a whole program on that too. Yes, they matter. I was just reading last night some updated data, and it's like, 50 some percent like it. Some people don't read it. It depends on the company. But let me just tell you, just because I might not read it as a recruiter, but I read all of them. The recruiter might say, well, I have too many other things to read. I'm just going to look at the resume. But I will tell you that the last CEO I worked for, she said, the cover letter is more important to me because I want to see how they communicate. I want to see how they persuade me to hire them. And the cover letter should be used. And I'm glad to do another topic on this for you, Stephanie, and it's not a whole hour. You can focus in the cover letter where the job posting says these 5 things are required. You can actually make a little table in there and say, these are the requirements. These are things I bring to the job and how I meet those requirements. It's so easy for the HR person then to say, this person is qualified. I don't have to read 4 or 5 paragraphs to see they meet the requirements. So I think it's more important than the resume. A lot of companies think that too, but again, it depends on how big the company is. Are they going to read all of those, et cetera, et cetera?
Another question we had was we've heard about like jobscan.co and a couple other websites where we can get an idea of our ATS score. But how do we know which phrases or keywords to include?
They're in the posting. You want to carefully look at the job posting. Every line in there, you want to see what words. Sometimes you could always think about doing a word cloud. Sometimes I pull things into an Excel spreadsheet and I see, okay, how many times has this word been used? How many times has this group of words been used? That sort of thing is helpful.
Okay. Does an ATS read 10, like $ 10M or 10K, or do you need to actually say 10 million or 10,000?
Well, I've had that question before, and I'm not really sure which is the best answer, because if you're a finance person, they might set it up so that the job posting has the M's and the K's, and that's what's in the posting, and that's what's fed into the ATS. So I would pay more attention to what's in the posting, because that's what it's going to look for, whatever they have in the posting.
Okay. I have another member who works at a community college. Sometimes students gain experience through an internship. Is it best to list that experience that align with their major in their internship section, or just put it in the experience section?
I think internships should be in the work experience section. Is that the question?
Okay. I think so. Okay, experience.
Yeah.
And then for veterans, how do you show military veteran status?
My husband is a veteran, and he has on there, a whole section of his military work, that he's, what is it called? Honorable discharge or whatever, and 20 years in or whatever. So that's wonderful to put on a resume. A lot of HR people want to hire veterans because they know they're very competent. I'm sorry, my air conditioner is not working very well today. I've been told I need a new A coil, and it's $3,200. So it's really hot in my house right now. I know.
That's brutal.
I found that out yesterday. It's like, oh, wonderful. That's expensive. Right before Christmas. So I'm sorry, I got off track.
That's okay.
Were you asking me?
The veteran status. We were talking about the veteran status.
So you absolutely want to put that on there. HR people love to hire veterans.
Okay. How do you recommend writing when someone attended some college, but they didn't actually get a degree? Do you still include it?
In that case, I would say, XYZ community college earned 30 credit hours in, general education, or if it's, toward a business degree, you took 12 business classes or something like that. So yeah, that would be, you would want to list that.
Okay. And then when it comes to the gaps, what are we defining as gaps? Are they months of a gap, like 2, 3, 4 months between jobs, or gaps considered more when there's a couple of years between
Or if you
jobs?
put like December 2019 ends one role and the next role starts January 2020.
Is
Yeah, that
is
wouldn't
that a
be
gap?
considered a gap. Mm-mm. So on a resume, if we're not talking about the ATS, I think it's better. This is what I do. I put the year, because if I ended a job in October and I started a job in January because I wanted to take a long vacation or I had something I had to do, it's not going to be as obvious by the year. If you're using an ATS and they're requiring you to put in the month and or the day, they might think it's a gap if it's, I would say, 6 months or more.
6 months. Okay, that's
Mhm.
fair. All right, there are many, many more questions, and I couldn't get to all of them. So please reach out. You can email me at srank@park.com or Shelly at shellytrent@live.com.
Uh-huh.
And we will make sure we get some answers for you. Again, thank you so much, Shelly, for your time today. We'll definitely talk about other topics maybe we can share. But everyone, have a good day. Thanks for staying late, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.